Welcome back to another 40k video brought to you by One Mind Syndicate. Today we're going to be talking about Warhammer 40k in Crisis, and I'm here with...
The Sound Alchemist.
Docile Creature.
It seems like everybody is hating on this current edition for a variety of reasons, some of them that I don't think are just.
Right. Throughout the entire, lifespan of 10th edition, which is very recent, to the point where we don't even have actual codices out, we've gotten a lot of pushback from the fans. Whether you've played it, or you've seen others play it, or you're just reading the lore, anything and everything that comes out for 10th edition has a lot of opinionated aspects to it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that there's a loud minority that's coming out and saying, Warhammer should be like this, Warhammer should be like that, and a lot of those opinions aren't new, which is really funny. Because the biggest one is that there is a huge balance problem in 40k.
Yeah, so when it comes to balance, we're talking about the actual gameplay. Rolling dice, putting minis on the battlefield, and just having fun. However, if you're talking about tournament scenes, there's a clear discrepancy between the highest winning armies and the not so well armies.
Yeah, and if you're a newcomer to 40k, I think that's something that might come off as annoying, that my army that I just purchased and I spent $1,000 on isn't performing as well as the next guy's army. Do you see that, Docile Creature, as kind of a newcomer to the tabletop? Because you played 9th and some of 8th, right?
8th, yeah. I think that's just baked into the way that Games Workshop rolls out rules and codexes in general. I think it's always going to be the case because the new codex has power, and then the old codexes get outshined by what comes out, and that's just how it's always going to be unless they start releasing codexes in a more quick manner, I think.
And I think what I've seen is that for the most part, it seems like the internet was saying that because everybody's getting their new rules for 10th editions all at the same time, there should be some type of balance. When in reality, no, that happened in 9th edition too, where we all got an index, and even within the index, things weren't balanced. So I think everybody points to that one list. What's it called? The meta watch list?
Oh, yeah. So GW has a list, I think it comes out every month or so, where they look at the tournaments and the armies that have been producing the most victories. And it's a very interesting list because at the end of the day, you would think Space Marines are always at the top, and usually they are. But this time, the Eldar are taking the cake a lot of times.
Space Marines aren't even the top 50%, I think.
Nope.
Just basic Space Marines. I think they're pretty far down on the list compared to everything else.
Yeah, from what I remember seeing, it's Eldar, Gene Stealers, Imperial Knights. What was the other one?
Custodes, yeah.
And then when you go down to the bottom, it's
the Leagues of Votan and the Tau.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks.
World Leaders, I think, too.
Yeah.
Which surprised me.
These armies were good in previous editions. 7th edition Tau blew it out the water to the point where everybody was allying Riptides because they were so good. And now you see the complete opposite of that, where everything got revamped when it came to marker lights, and when I look at the rules and the stats, I don't even want to play Tau. It's not because they're losing, but because they did such a heavy revamp on the lore and the aspects of that.
Speaking of strong opinions in the community, maybe that's just GW finally listening to the community and trying to phase out Tau because Tau is trash.
Even though they should have done that with Eldar, I think Eldar, there's still meta models that don't get updates. So I think
True.
If any faction within 40k should be completely getting rid of, I think Eldar. For me, what do you guys do? What do you guys think?
I don't think they should get rid of anything. I'm not going to forget what you said about the Tau, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But I think the worst thing that GW is doing with this Meta Watch is at the end of their article, they're putting links to, oh, look, every list has a Wraith Knight. Here's a link to purchase your own Wraith Knight. Isn't that some BS?
They're flaunting the imbalance and being hey, let's
you
sell
want to
some
win
models
games.
this way. Yeah.
You're talking about equivalent to a Wraith Knight kind of thing, or
No, an actual, because Eldari was so dominant, they would link to hey, if you want to be dominant too, get a Wraith Knight. They're in every list.
Okay.
Stuff
So
like that.
then that begs the question: did GW do that on purpose? Where now they're trying to say
They wrote the article, right? They chose to.
This is a conscious thought. But when you're making the indexes, I don't think they knew the Wraith Knight was going to be. Yeah.
Okay.
They might have pushed them a little more
through
because
playtesting.
Yeah, but I don't think they expected them to be this dominant.
Because I think it's weird that World Eaters, Leagues of Votan are at the bottom when they were the ones that just got the
They're
last
some of the
update.
newest armies.
So like, of course, they're gonna put them as like the shittiest armies because people just bought a bunch of them. We want that to stop, and now we want them to buy the things that nobody were purchasing, which was Gene Stealers, Adeptus Custodes, and that or Eldar.
Yeah, it's weird how they're trying to reverse the stakes in a lot of things, because at the end of the day, they're a business, right? They're trying to make money, they're trying to bring in more new people, and they're trying to overall just kind of flip the switch. And that brings me to the next huge topic, and that is the phasing out of the Space Marines, the firstborn Space Marines.
Because that's another like power grab by GW. It seems that it's the firstborn going away. The lore even like helps out by saying like, yeah, obviously, like why would a chapter want firstborn? They want all Primaris, and now you're forced, if you're an old school player, you gotta buy the new stuff.
Can I swear?
You can swear, yeah.
Fuck them.
Fuck GW or the
No,
firstborn?
the firstborns. Yeah, I'm biased because I came into this. I started collecting.
You just
Space
like
Marines.
Phobos Marines.
No, the Gravis. But
Oh, well, there you go. Gravis.
I started collecting Space Marines as the Primaris were like just rolling out. So like I love them. But like, do you really look at the firstborn models and you're like, yeah, that's great. Like I want more of that on the table.
I get hard, yeah.
I mean, okay. I guess to each their own, which is really the crux of the dilemma, right?
Especially when you look at like the old Scout models.
You like those?
Yeah, those snipers.
I mean, sure, yeah. Put a sniper rifle on anything, then it looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
But is it like a surprise that like this is happening? I feel like GW should have. I think the fact that they made the Primaris Marines and then said that there was something else instead of just like a update to the old models was a Band-Aid and now they're really feeling the pain of that, because if they would have just back then been like, no, these are just firstborns, but it's a new sculpt, it's an updated true scale sculpt, then I don't think we would have this problem.
Yeah.
Because then you can still play your firstborns and still have the old models and the new models. But since they made it a whole different thing, it's like, well, now we got to have rules for both of these, and some people are gonna like the old stuff, some people are gonna like the new stuff, and you can, if we don't update the firstborn stuff, then the people that like firstborn are gonna hate it, and if we phase that stuff out, then they're gonna hate it. But if these Primaris sculpts were just firstborn, then they could just say, oh, we're just phasing out old models like they do with every other range when new models come out, and nobody would be crying about it.
Yeah, I get you.
I guess GW really got themselves in a bad situation where it's a lose-lose, because you change the lore with Belisarius Call, essentially doing heretics' work and tampering with the work of the God Emperor. Like, the Emperor created them in perfection, essentially. Like, and now Belisarius Call is like, nah, I can improve on your perfection.
Yeah.
So it's like, that is heresy. And instead of that, it's like, no, we'll allow it because the Imperium needs it. Like, they're in a crisis.
Something I don't like about what's happening with that is that the lore is being almost like retcon, and GW is just okay with saying like, we established that the Space Marines were sacred, holy things that were not supposed to be touched even by the Adeptus Mechanicus, but no, the Adeptus Mechanicus dealt with, like, what you said, heresy.
So, I know you guys are a lore channel, right? How much of the Games Workshop people that buy the models and play the game, what percentage of those people do you think actually have any knowledge of the lore?
A big percentage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, because obviously, if you're a newcomer to 40K, you're not just diving into the board game. Like you're playing the board game because you played the video games or you read some of the novels.
Because I think that brings up a good point where new players are getting into this and thinking this is a game, like it's supposed to be a game. When in reality, like the old school players, it's like, the game has actually always sucked. Like you're better off playing Hero Clicks or like some other tabletop.
Clicks.
Yeah,
something that's way more competitive and more balanced, which is like the whole point of their argument that are people hating on it. For the old school gamers, it's like, no, most of the fun of 40K is building your army, painting your army, learning the lore, creating your own. When you actually sit down after 2 hours, you're like, all right, I'm done. Like, I don't want to play anymore. Because that's happened to us, right?
Many times.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things where, like, the thought of playing 40K is more fun than actually playing 40K.
Yep.
Because you have this, like, scenario going on in your head, like, oh, this World Eater Berserker is taking on an entire army of Tau and, like, coming out on top. But then you play the game and it's like, oh crap.
They were killed by Gretchen.
Yeah, Gilliman died by a squig.
Well,
Yeah.
usually Gilliman's put in the front lines and then he dies. And
Yeah,
You're supposed to take it and keep going.
no,
definitely didn't.
The novels lied.
they did.
They lied.
Gilliman was supposed to be a tactician.
Yeah,
No.
didn't have plot armor on the tabletop.
No. Unfortunately not.
But so another point that I think when Docile Creature was talking, he was pointing out that it's funny to me that like you're okay with saying like Primaris are better and Firstborn are going away, but the reality is that most old school players who have Firstborn, they're not too like worried about like new Primaris updates. There's a loud minority for sure,
Yeah.
but I think it's because OG players are used to like that whole concept of like, yeah, GW does shady shit.
And I think I'm starting to feel it a little bit, not nearly on the same scale, but when they took away, like, they weren't going to update Contemptors and Leviathans for this new edition, I was pissed. Because I'm like, oh, they're taking away my toys. And that's got to be what the Firstborn lovers feel like, right? But on a more massive scale.
100%.
Yeah.
I've got a Firstborn army that I've had commissioned, painted professionally, and it's like, well, this sucks because now I can't bring this awesome painted army to play on, like, whether it's a GW store or something like that, without getting the okay of my opponent, obviously. Like, if you're just here to have fun, you could play it, whatever.
It's also, I found myself second guessing purchasing older models recently because is this the next thing that's going to just get the axe randomly because it's an older model? Because I would have never expected Contemptors and Leviathans to go away.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because they're popular among our play group, but like they seem like really cool models that people enjoy.
Yeah.
And the fact that those got axed means like nothing is safe to me, especially when it's like an older model. So like, should I even buy this? Because is it even going to be viable? Am I going to commission people to get it built and painted for me if it's next edition? It's just going to be gone.
But it makes you build tougher skin as a consumer of this miniature war game that's just going to keep getting more expensive. Because I remember when, I think it was last edition, I started looking at the old school Gretchen models, old school Orc models that I would play as Gretchen models. Because I figured like, oh, they're going to be cheaper. Went on eBay. They're not. They're just as expensive. So that's another thing too, that like GW knows that just because they're going to discontinue this model from the tabletop, it's still going to sell.
Oh yeah, the secondary market will repurpose it to either be used as like a piece of terrain, or have some green stuff on it to convert it to something more akin to what the army that you're playing to is now. So yeah, there's always going to be a use for these models. You could even play them outside of like 40K and maybe use them for like D&D or some other tabletop game.
So then, going back to the main topic, is 40K in crisis to the newcomers? And
No,
the
no.
OGs are just kind of like,
If
that's
anything,
just GW.
If anything, GW is definitely molding themselves to be a game for newcomers.
Yeah.
GW, in my opinion, is not in any type of crisis right now. They are at the beginning of their golden age. Ever since 8th edition hit, we saw an influx of new players coming into the game. We saw GW create Warhammer community, becoming more open to its players, its wargamers all across the world, giving you articles, being more upfront with you, giving you new models, new additions, more constantly, updating the rules, listening to tournaments to see what players want. So I think they're using all this and giving what the majority wants, but at the same time, the minority is very loud, and a lot of people tend to hear that over the benefits. Because at the end of the day, you see some videos on YouTube, are you going to click on top 10 best things about GW or top 10 worst things about GW? And unfortunately, the negatives tend to get more attention than the positives, and I feel like that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, we clickbaited you guys for a reason, right?
Because it works.
Yeah.
I think what's going to end up happening too is that because it seems the game is being more open to newcomers, the concept of change is going to hurt a lot of players, both old and new, in a way of like that nostalgic factor that I think you were talking in a previous video of just like they feel left out because 40K is not what it used to be in 9th edition or 10th edition and stuff like that. So then they're going to come out and say like, yeah, negative emotions validate my feelings of right now of like losing that nostalgia. So I wonder if that has to do with a lot of the negativity that's coming around 10th edition too.
It could be. It could play a part in it, but at the same time, it's like you go to a 40K store and you generally see people playing Warhammer 40K.
Yeah.
Like you want to get a game in, you're probably going to find somebody to get it. So there are people out there playing it, regardless if you think this game is horrible or GW's just trying to take your money. Because at the end of the day, this is an outlet for people to let their fantasies play out in real time.
Yeah.
Because obviously people go to video games, but this is something much more than that. You're creating an army, putting your own lore into it, building your own models, and just fashioning this awesome mental image onto a physical model that you can touch, paint, and play out. And I think that's something that GW knows they've got in the bag and will use that to get more players in there and at the end of the day to get more of your money.
Yeah.
And new players aren't going to be upset about old lore that was retconned because
Yeah.
they don't know about it. They just see the cool shiny models and they're like, I like this. They look up the lore to where what interests them, and anything before that doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
That's also another reason why you don't see a lot of named characters dying, because you want to keep these characters playing and having their sculpts keep being used.
That's true. And then that's like the primarification or crossing the Rubicon of all the old all the old models too.
Yep.
Oh, Caven Shrike looks really bad as a firstborn. He's going to become a Primaris now.
Does he look better? Probably not, because they all have the same pose, but still.
Yeah, I mean, why give us, what was it, Snickrot for the orcs?
Which is the same model as the old model.
It's the exact
I think the old
same
one's
thing.
better.
Yeah, because he's doing like the shh.
He's got like a
motif.
cool, I don't know. Just,
Yeah.
This looks like a normal orc now.
Right, so like why do that? Invest time, money, and effort into creating a new orc model that didn't need it when the Eldar still have metal models.
Because they know we're going to pay for it, and GW's money hungry.
Yeah.
And I don't think Eldar is the most popular faction.
No.
Just in general, yeah. Which I think adds to that whole aspect of, it seemed like in past editions, Xenos were always ignored, and Space Marines were always like the main thing. That's why we have like 10 different lieutenants or
Lieutenants, yeah.
100.
A lieutenant for every month. A
yeah.
lieutenant for every piece of lore that comes out.
So I wonder what's going to happen now, because I think everybody is hoping that the balance fixes itself with the codexes coming out, which it won't. Like, let's be
won't.
real.
It never has, and
Yeah.
it never will.
Yeah.
Whoever gets the codex first is definitely going to have a leg up on the competition.
Yep.
Maybe.
Until the next ones come out.
Yeah. Because then it's going to be like that until the next
a
one
wheel.
comes out. Yep. And then you're going to end up getting screwed over by, like if Sisters of Battles are the last codex to update, they're going to be good for a month.
Yeah.
Yeah,
then
and then
gone.
the next edition's
And
coming
then the
out.
wheel starts all over
Yep.
again, and they'll be the weakest again.
Yeah. So I wonder if with every single edition or in every single codex that comes out, we're going to get newer models in addition to like a Space Marine lieutenant.
Yeah, and the thing that sucks about that is that you got to pay for the codex.
Yeah.
Yeah, with like Age of Sigmar, you get your rules for free. So it doesn't matter if you're like the worst army, they could just give you an FAQ the next day and you won't have to pay for that. Whereas with 40K, it's like not only will you have to pay, but you also have to wait. And
Yeah.
that sucks.
Yeah.
Because that just might mean shelving your army and playing a different one until you get a rules update.
And then those rules might suck.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to like putting things behind a paid source, so like the Codex, but also now we have the GW app, the what is it called, Battleforge?
Yeah, so essentially Battleforge is probably gone by the time you see this video. 'Cause,
August
like,
1st. No, I guess
September 1st.
September 1st.
Yeah, because it sucks because at the time of playing 10th edition, it was free.
Yeah.
The index was free, the app was free, you could play to your heart's content. They were updating rules once or twice, and now you've gotten a taste of what it means to have the app, have all your rules in one nice, comfortable place, and now it's gone.
Do you guys like the app better than the alternative, which was what was it?
Battlescribe?
Battlescribe.
I liked it a lot. I'm going to be real sad when it's gone.
I think I'm gonna pay for it. Like I think I'm one of the ones that they got. I was like, oh yeah, why not?
It does come with other things. That's the good thing. Like, how much is it even? Like,
So it's like $6 USD, but it does come with a subscription to Warhammer Plus. So in
That's
that,
not nothing.
Right, in that sense, essentially it's free, and you get content from Warhammer Plus. But that to me doesn't take away the fact that GW kind of pulled the rug under us.
yeah, it's like you get the first one for free, and then it's like if you want more.
Yeah, they're essentially a dealer right now.
Yeah.
It's like first one's on me, but we know you're coming back.
Well,
I
plastic
mean, they got
crack for a
you.
reason,
Yeah,
yeah.
they got you.
Yeah, I have an addictive personality, I guess. Maybe that's why I'm an alcoholic. Yeah.
GW got us by the balls, and they're just squeezing and squeezing and squeezing until finally we pop and you give us Slanesh.
But we can't yuck anybody's yum.
That's true.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that GW doesn't do, Slanesh, like, why are they?
Please.
Yeah, like we've got World Eaters codices, we've got Death Guard codices, we've got The Thousand Sons. Where's the Emperor's Children? There are 4 Chaos Gods. Why don't you give us what we want? The 4th one, Slanesh.
If they do end up coming out with Slanesh, I hope they don't do what they did in the AOS range. Because as much as I like Slanesh, I want them to look more like...
Titties.
Yes, titties, but also like...
Anteaters.
Yeah, no, not anteaters. I want them to look like Hellraiser Xenobites. Like, I want them to look like
Pinhead.
Yeah, like Pinhead, like more horror. Because in AOS, they just look like elegant, like
elves,
Renaissance, like demony, and I just don't like it at all.
Yeah, so instead of like elegance, you want more body horror kind of things.
Exactly.
Which would make sense just because I think when it comes to... So the Emperor's Children are supposed to be Slanesh, right? Like they're supposed to be perfection. But at the same time, I feel like when it comes to perfection, isn't that more of a Khorne thing? Like we're going to get into the Lord now, but like, and it's kind of a tangent, but... When it comes to Khorne, isn't Khorne supposed to be about blood, but also glory and like being the best warrior kind of thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, they all kind of bleed into one another, but yeah, Khorne's trying to be the perfect warrior, the perfect head cleaver, which again, they're kind of at odds. Like if you look at the 4 Chaos Gods, Khorne and Slanesh like hate each other.
Maybe because they're both trying to go for the same body type.
Maybe. And that's something GW does not want to dip their toes in.
I would like to see more body horror, though, from Slanesh. That would be really dope.
And it's not something that they're, like, against doing. Like, we've seen body horror in other Chaos models. Just I want more spikes and... Not spikes, but, like, nails and faces and...
Holes.
Lots of
bloody
little
holes.
bloody
And the
holes.
thing is, like, they had that very early on with, like, Rogue Trader in the early editions. And I feel like the more they go into, I guess, the current timeline of 40K, they're just trying to pander to a wider audience. Warhammer Adventures, everybody.
Well, even though I think that's kind of going away. I think that for a second, GW was thinking, like, yeah, let's make this more kid-friendly.
Monopoly,
Yeah.
kids' books.
The pop dolls or whatever.
Yeah, Funko Pops.
There you go.
Yeah.
But I think they're starting to come back, especially when you look at the Codex art.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Very, very grim dark. And if we can get some Slenderman-looking Slaneshi demons, it would be nice.
Oh, please. Please.
Next thing we know, we got some Five Nights at Freddy's stuff.
Yeah. But maybe that's why Warhammer is at a crisis, is because they're pussies and they don't want to put like more pussy.
Yeah. Just give us what we want.
Give us what we want.
I mean, I think GW is listening though. Like
They're not.
a little bit. Like they're we saw that Warhammer Adventures was something that was too far away from the grimdark aspect of 40K.
Yeah.
And when's the last time they published one? Probably at least a year now, right?
I mean, I don't think they're listening to the players. I think they're listening to the wallets. And like,
Yeah.
if nobody bought it, if it didn't make any money, that's why it's getting the axe. Not because a bunch of us were like, stop making kids stuff. Like,
That's
they don't
true.
give a shit about that. If it made money, they would still be making
That's
it.
true.
Yeah. What they are listening to us is like progressing lore, right? I do
Yeah.
feel like they're doing that.
The lore is progressing, but sometimes I feel like the whole thing with like Abaddon and the World Claimer, like that didn't really lead to anything.
I love the World Claimer personally.
I mean, he's a cool model. I love the whole thing about
like
he like
the
throws
lore,
his spear and like that world is now claimed and it's gonna die. But at the end of it all, like, what did that really change for the lore of 40K?
And sometimes I'm thinking that maybe GW does that because they have to keep it story driven to appease all the people that are just book readers, which we're starting to find out. As a lore channel, the majority of you guys are lore readers, like reading from the Black Library, Horus Heresy, and all that kind of stuff. Whereas we come from like the all-encompassing like game. So they have to balance between the lore readers and then the tabletop. And in the tabletop, you have to have some type of sandboxy element to it, where like you can have a named character, but that named character has to have some type of what would it be called? Ambiguity. Like you have to create your own little story because you have that model. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you guys think the lore will ever progress?
I mean, it is. It has been.
Gilliman coming back.
In a meaningful
The
way.
Lion coming
because all the Primarchs can come back. But it's not like the Imperium is ever going to beat Chaos or ever going to beat the Tyranids or ever going to beat the Necrons.
Yeah.
Like, none of these factions are ever going to get defeated fully because they still have models on the tabletop and people still want to play them. And if they killed all the Space Marines, there'd be so many people that are upset about it. So can any meaningful change ever happen, or is it all just going to be, we're fighting for this star over here, and then somebody wins, and then it doesn't really change anything.
Yeah, it's the thing about GW lore is that it's very cyclical. Like, there's nobody ever winning for very long. One time the Tyranids will be on top, then the Tau, then we'll focus on the Eldar, and it's just a cycle. That's why I feel like before, when we had all the Primarchs fighting against one another, that's kind of what we're going to slowly get with each Primarch coming back. We've gotten 3 of the 4 Demon Primarchs, we've got the Lion, we've got Guilliman. Eventually we'll get more Loyalists, and eventually there's going to be like a Siege of Terra version 2, and then the Emperor will achieve another type of apotheosis, and the cycle is just going to keep on happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like, Warhammer 40k makes a lot of money for GW. They know what they have, and like you said, they don't want to mess it up by taking out a completely playable faction from the game.
If anything, they're adding new factions, because we got the Leagues of Wotan now, so like they're just another piece of the pie fighting that'll never get wiped out, and they'll never kill anybody else. So,
But I think the Leagues of Votan are a good example of a faction that has changed dramatically. Because before, with the old squat lore, they were just abhumans. Now they have a whole thing where each one of them is a clone. They have, what are the giant vols?
Yeah, the vols.
Yeah, so it's STC technology. Will we see that in like a 50k style thing? The only like huge climactic thing that I think could happen to 40k for the players to really say like, oh, this is a different game, would be the Return of the Emperor. I feel
I still
like
don't
either
feel,
as a god or something else.
Like, even them rebranding to Warhammer 50k.
Yeah.
Like, I still don't feel like that'll be as beneficial to them to making or keeping on with Warhammer 40k.
do you think if they ever brought the Emperor back, like that would just be too much? Like that would put the Imperium in such a commanding position that they're just never going to do it?
Yeah, and I think it would almost create the same feeling that if they ever decided to make one single ruler of the Tyranids, it'd be like, oh fuck, it's not as fun anymore. Because why would you not want to play? Like, I could understand somebody playing a Space Marine chapter, but like, why would you not want to feel the Emperor of Mankind?
I'm even like, they kind of did that for Necrons, right? With the Silent King, they brought him back.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, wouldn't the Emperor being back, like, just lore-wise at least, like, brings
'cause
so much power to the Imperium?
I feel like GW has always been a game about, dark fantasy, like a grim dark universe. There is no hope, and the Emperor is exactly that, hope personified. And I think bringing back the Emperor and kind of unifying Terra and all the Imperium kind of leads us to a state where it's similar to Star Wars, where you lose the grim darkness and you have more of just a sci-fi trope.
For
you
sure.
also lose a lot of the conflict within the Imperium because, like, where the Imperial cult, like, is he going to be like, hey, stop, or is he going to embrace it? But
Yeah, that's why if they did bring him back, I think they would have to bring him back as a god, and make it kind of like weird to be like, he's here but not really. Kind of like the what's the fire dudes, the Space Marine chapter with
The Legion of the Damned?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not, and then it becomes like a myth of like, oh, the Emperor is back. No, he's not. He's on the Golden Throne. Have you been to the Golden Throne? I can't go there.
Right. And that still creates schism and creates a divided Imperium, because then you have believers in the God Emperor and believers in the Corpse Emperor, so it'll create a whole divide
Heresy.
between that. Yeah.
I would eat that up. Like, when I read the lore of the Inquisition, where it's like what are they called? The Horasians or whatever, who want to use chaos against chaos, and they're going up against other Puritan Inquisitor, like that whole Civil War. It's like, it's Game of Thrones. It's like, it just gives me that feel of like, oh, there's drama here.
political infighting.
So that would be, if anything, if the Emperor came back, it would make the Imperium. I guess it depends on how they bring him back. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely, because, I mean, we've seen GW do this before with the Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
Because before, it was, Warhammer Fantasy?
Yeah. But I'm not sure, but, like, wasn't that the same universe, though? Just like
It
a new
was.
age?
Yeah.
Like a continuation of the lore?
Right, and I
I
think
think there's a catastrophe though. Right?
there was a catastrophe that
some chaos dude
changed
broke the
it.
world or something, right?
Yeah, but that's the same thing as 40k becoming 50k. Some huge
Yeah.
event changes the galaxy, and it's never going to be the same.
And then just like now we have Old World coming back in October.
Yeah.
So I think people would be really nostalgic of 40k, and they would be, no, bring us back when the Emperor was just on the throne.
But isn't that just what 30k is? Isn't that what Horus Heresy is?
No, because 30k came after. Like, I feel like 40k was established, and then they were like, well, before we talk about, or let's talk about the Horus Heresy. Kind of like with Star Wars, right? Where it was like 1, 2, and 3 came after
3, 4, and 5, or 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, like basically the events that shaped the But yeah, that's true.
I mean, it would make more sense for GW to go back and talk about like the Unification Wars instead of going on to 50K.
Which is a whole other topic that we can talk about in another episode, because the Unification Wars to me is like, oh, that's fucking badass. But we'll talk about that in another episode. I hope you guys enjoyed hanging out and just bantering about why Warhammer 40K is or isn't in crisis.
So if you guys have any other suggestions for topics that you want all of us to banter and talk about, let us know in the comments, because we'll get to them eventually. Hopefully soon.
And don't forget to subscribe. Hit us up with a super thanks. If you have a suggestion and you give us a super thanks, we're more likely to answer that, just because you're supporting the channel. And this was Gershwan.
The Sound Alchemist.
Docile creature.
And we are out of here.